Afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Council Planning Committee. We do have one apology, I understand, from the Deputy Lord Mayor. So if somebody...
Alderman Barakas, before you resume the chair, we need a motion to put you in the chair. So I
was actually about to say that, yes.
I move that Alderman Barakas is in the chair in the absence of our Deputy Lord Mayor.
Excellent. So we've got a motion to call up myself as chair. Are there any dissenting voices on that, or do we want to put it to a vote?
I think I put it to the vote because I moved. And all right, okay. I think we don't need to put it to the vote. I'm sure.
Right. Well, there being no other comment on that, I'll take that as carried, and I'll graciously accept the position for the night. So the first item we do have on the agenda now then is confirmation of minutes. Does anybody want to move that?
So yeah, I move.
Okay, I think Councillor Harvey got in there first. So all those in favour? Oh, we'll do it the proper Zoom way. Sorry, apologies. Alderman Briscoe.
I support.
Councillor Harvey.
Support.
Councillor Dutta.
Yes.
Councillor Coates.
Yes. And
I support. So that is carried. Next up, we have consideration of supplementary items. I don't believe there are any. No, there are none. Any indications of pecuniary or conflicts of interest? There appears to be none. Oh,
just a question.
Yes.
We haven't, in fact, moved a motion to co-opt Councillor Harvey, I understand. Is that right?
Councillor Harvey is already a member of the committee.
Yeah, I've been a member of the committee since.
Yeah. Sorry.
All good. All good. So I take it there was no indications of pecuniary or conflicts of interest. Transfer of agenda items. Does anybody wish to transfer any agenda items? No. Okay, we'll move into planning authority. Committee acting as a planning authority, and the first item we have is 7.1.1. which is 14 Stoke Street, and I believe we have one deputation from Mr. Corney, which is the applicant. So can we let him in, Mr. Garth? Mr. Corney, you there?
Chairman, did we have a mover for the deputations to be heard?
Oh, apologies.
I move that motion, Chair.
Very good. I'll run through the item. Alderman Briscoe. I can't hear you, Alderman Briscoe.
I think with these motions, we just say, is there any dissent?
Just take it. All right. So if there is no dissent, I'm happy to accept that as passed. So we now have Mr. Corney here on the line. Mr. Corney, is connected to the audio. Oh, you there, Mr. Corney?
Good evening.
Good evening. Welcome to the Council Planning Committee. You've got 5 minutes to give us your piece.
Thank you. Starting now.
Starting now.
For people that don't know me, I was a senior heritage advisor for the Heritage Council for the first 10 years of its operation, and was responsible for the establishment of the Heritage Register and the processes for dealing with it. And so I'm an experienced heritage architect and possibly the most experienced in the state. This particular application is for a low, transparent house behind an existing high hedge, behind an existing heritage listed building, the gate known as the gatehouse. The Heritage Officer of Council has made a recommendation for refusal based on impacts on social significance. And it's my view that the assessment is flawed in 3 important ways. One is that the assessment mixes up historic significance with social significance. The site does have historic significance, but both the Heritage Act and the Borough Charter, on which the planning scheme is based, define social significance differently to historic significance. The social significance, to quote, is when a place, in this case the grass area behind the hedge, has special meaning for any living group or community because of social, cultural or spiritual association. For example, the War Memorial has a strong association with those people that commemorate Anzac Day, or, for example, historic streetscape elements, which are often a source of public submissions. The 14 days public advertising for this project, or for any heritage project, is always towards drawing out two and only two relevant things. One is the impact on neighbours, the direct impact on neighbours, and two, whether or not a site has social significance. The 14-day advertising for this site didn't draw out any public submissions, and it's a reasonable conclusion that, given the discrete nature of the grassed area behind a high hedge, and given that no public activity takes place on that piece of grassed area, and given that no member of the public objected to this proposal, it's reasonable to conclude that the grassed area behind the hedge has no social significance to the community. The historic significance of the site will be unaffected by the proposal. The existing gatehouse and its historic connections to Josiah Spode remain unaffected by the proposal. The second elementary error made in the assessment is to claim that the grassed area contains or is the remnant landscape of Spode's earlier house. This is simply untrue. We employed an arborist, Alistair Hodgman, who puts the cypress pines and the other plantings on 14 Stoke Street, that is our site, at between 20 and 30 years old. None of the planting is older than that. It's younger than all of us here. Very mature pines nearby on the driveway to 12 Stoke Street are of cultural significance. They're over 100 years old and were certainly planted after the construction of the 1887 Stoke House. The landscape at 12 Stoke Street will not be disturbed by this proposal. I've given a number of public talks on cultural landscapes in Tasmania. You can confidently say that the grassed area proposed for the house development is neither a remnant of Spode's landscape, nor is it an element of significant cultural significance as a landscape. The third error made in the assessment is to use the demolition clause of the planning scheme to justify refusal. To quote, demolition must not result in the loss of significant fabric, forms, items, outbuildings, or landscape elements that contribute to the historic cultural heritage significance of the place or precinct. The Heritage Office's assessment admits that the Georgian period use of this grassed area is unknown. It follows that it cannot and should not be assumed that this landscape of grass is of cultural significance associated with Spode. If the Heritage Officer actually is referring to the space rather than the grass, then the demolition clause then doesn't apply. Notwithstanding that, I don't believe that the space itself has social significance or any cultural significance. The Heritage Council, the Planning Officer and the Heritage, the Hobart City Council's engineer have all recommended conditional approval. I'm comfortable with the conditions they've recommended. My client is comfortable with the conditions that are recommended. In my, I'd claim, expert view on heritage matters, I don't believe this low pavilion style transparent house behind a hedge, on grass behind a hedge, set well behind the heritage building will have any impact on heritage significance, and certainly not on social significance. Thank you for hearing me on this.
Thank you, Mr. Corney. I think that was just about time as well. Are there any questions? I think Councillor Dutta has his hand up on the thing. Did you have anything to ask, Councillor Dutta?
Just one question. Would you thank you for your presentation? It's well presented, and I appreciated the points. I have a question to ask, and the question is that the acts used by the heritage officer of the council and the Tasmanian Heritage Council are two different acts, isn't it? And therefore the conclusion would be different.
Yes, but I've referred to the planning scheme clause, not the Heritage Act, in that quote that I gave you. That's the quote out of your planning scheme.
So, thank you very much. Thanks for the clarification.
Any other questions? Alderman Briscoe, you appear to be next, and Councillor Dudder, can you please put your hand down? Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Corney. Yes, I think you had the same.
Oh.
Conundrum of significance. Can you tell me what it would be?
Alderman Briscoe, I think you just cut out for a second there, so you might want to repeat the question.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Corney, for your presentation. I too had was about what the social significance was. A colonial figure had his house maybe there. What ongoing social significance would be a garden. Would you like to speculate what you think, if there was social significance, what it would be?
Certainly, there's social significance with the house. It's the existing house, in that it's part of a heritage listed streetscape, and it has connections with Josiah Spode. But there's, in my view, no social significance associated with the rear yard behind the hedge. Council would undoubtedly approve a garage there. They wouldn't refuse it on the basis of social significance. All we're doing here is providing something a bit bigger than the garage.
Question.
It'll be just as invisible as a garage would be on that side. So no,
Yes,
I don't believe that part of the site has any social significance. I can't guess it. I think what the Heritage Officer has done a good investigation of the history of the site, and as commonly happens with heritage officers, they get bound up in the interest of the history of the site and believe that has social significance because of the interest of the history. It's a common fault with lesser experienced heritage assessments.
Was there a follow-up question, Alderman Briscoe?
Yes, thank you, Alderman Barakis. Yeah, so you have no knowledge of significant events that have happened on the grounds where this proposal was?
No, none at all.
No. Good. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And Councillor Harvey.
So Mr. Corney, the way I kind of interpret this as a layperson is that you've got a significant house here with a significant story that was on a substantial piece of land, including the gatehouse plus the subject site we're discussing at the moment. And all of that combined forms the historical significance of this small precinct. That's how I interpret this. So are you arguing that the land has no relationship to the house, and therefore it doesn't matter whether or not the curtilage around the house is developed?
No, I'm not arguing it has no relationship with it. Just to go back a step, this isn't the original entrance to the house. The original house, that is Stoke House, the original entrance was off Newtown Road. This entrance was built when that house was rebuilt in 1887. So the supposed connection with Spode, who was the person that built the gatehouse, isn't there at all. There's no historical connection between Spode and the current Stoke House. Nevertheless, from 1887, they became associated. And I'm not denying that historical association. I'm just saying that it's not of social significance, even though the owner of Stoke House was a member of Parliament. It's not an association that is of social significance, and certainly the landscape that surrounds Stoke House, of which the mature pines on 12 Stoke Street are part of, are all part of a landscape and association of the one site. However, that doesn't mean you can't build on it and that it should remain vacant forever. They're actually two different titles now. They're not part of the same property. They're part of the place, but they're not of social significance. And as I've said, I'm sure council would approve a garage on that site. So we're really arguing the difference between a garage and a larger structure. And I've tried to make it as transparent as possible and like a garden pavilion in its appearance.
And you're the architect and heritage consultant for the project?
Correct. That's correct.
Chairman, I'm assuming we're going to hear from a council planner after this?
I believe they are available, yes. If there's no other questions for Mr. Corney, I do have one. Mr. Corney, if we're going to effectively boil down, I guess, what you're suggesting in your deputation, is it that the council report is, how would you put it, relying on some assumptions to assert the case that there's a connection between Mr. Spode and the landscape of the area? Is that effectively what the suggestion is?
Well, it's making three fundamental errors. One is that it deals with social significance. It's claiming it's social significance rather than historic significance, and there's no impact on historic significance. That back block is certainly not of social significance. That's the first error. The second error is that the grass itself is of social significance. And the third error is to use the demolition clause to suggest that demolishing a piece of grass is an impact on cultural significance.
Thank you very much. If there's no other questions, Mr. Corney, thank you very much for your deputation. You're free to stay on and listen to the debate as it goes on, but thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. And I do believe the council heritage officers are available if anyone does have any questions. I see Alderman Briscoe has his hand up, so Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you, Chairman.
Alderman Briscoe, your connection's a bit janky. Do you want to try and repeat that, please?
Can anyone hear me?
That sounds better. That sounds better.
All right. Could I ask the heritage officer, Ms. Waite, what is the social significance of that garden area behind the house?
So can everybody hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Yes.
So the question was the social significance of the area behind the house. The heritage officer who did the assessment for this one was not claiming that there was social significance associated with the rear of the property. The claim was some sort of the historical associations between what is the gatekeeper's house, which is the little house on the current parcel of land, and that relationship between it and where the original Spode house was, which is in fact the site of the current Stoke house. So it is the space within the space for the new proposal is the area where the new dwelling is proposed, and that is within the grounds of that 19th century estate. So that is the claim. So despite the subdivision actually having occurred, the officer recommended that it or came to the conclusion that the small building on Stoke Street shares the grounds of the larger Stoke Lodge, and that there are some remnant trees, not on this particular site, but associated with Stoke Lodge, that help to interpret that sense of connection, historic connection between Stoke Lodge and the gatekeeper's cottage.
Thank you. Was there anything else, Alderman Briscoe?
Well, I'd like to move a motion of approval. Subject
Look,
to
I'm happy to have that one. I think there might be a couple more questions, but we can have that one as.
That's okay. I mean, the motion is open for debate.
Sure. Do you want to move that now?
Yes.
Yep. Very good. So we've got
conditions. And
Alderman Briscoe, you're cutting out again.
can you hear me now?
I can hear.
For this application, subject to conditions.
So I heard that he's moving the motion with appropriate conditions. Are there appropriate conditions, Director?
There are, but I don't have them. Was yes, we will have the standard conditions will be imposed, but I don't have them with me. They can be circulated prior to council.
Okay. Okay. Did you have anything else, Alderman Briscoe? Because I do think we have a question from Councillor Dutta.
Nothing from me.
Councillor Dutta.
Yeah, I was wondering through you, Chair, there were 3 points made with regards to the argument that was presented. The first one with regards to the social has been asked and answered. I am wondering if the officer would respond to the 2 other errors of judgment made by the speaker in the first deputation.
Okay,
With
so
regards to grass and demolition.
yes. So the demolition provisions of I'll go to the third one first. The demolition provisions talk about the loss of landscape elements. And in this case, it is just that loss of the spatial relationship between the cottage and the larger estate. So yes, there is some loss of vegetation, but that's certainly not been identified as being significant vegetation. The other matter was to do with the it not being a remnant site. Let me just check that. So the rear of the property is certainly an open space, and the officer assessing it had no issue with the design of the proposal, and in fact said it was of an appropriate scale and materiality. In this case, the issue is about the positioning of something within that space and the relationship that the house on Stoke Street has with the Stoke Lodge, the larger property, which was once there. So it's absolutely true that the gatekeeper's cottage on Stoke Lodge, on Stoke Street, is not the frontage to what is there at Stoke Lodge. Stoke Lodge, or the house prior to Stoke Lodge, which was Spode's house, was accessed off Newtown Road. It was a very large property, and that property has been subdivided multiple times, and that the only way to gain access to that property is now through Stoke Street, which is a later street.
Right. Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Chairman. Just to clarify, Ms. Waite, Council on numerous occasions, to my knowledge, have refused have refused development applications adjacent to heritage properties for heritage reasons. So does this one sit in the same sort of vein as other refusals that we've agreed to at council? I'm trying to think of other examples, but I'm sure you've got them in your mind as well, where we've said, you know, these developments inappropriate because of its vicinity to a heritage property. So is this the same circumstances or is it different?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. It is a little bit different. The provisions here are the reasons for refusal are specific to demolition rather than its relationship to the new development to the heritage listed place.
Okay. Yep. Okay. So it's not based on its location to the substantial house or the cottage. It's based on the principle of this demolition clause. Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just ask a couple of questions myself. Just going off something you said earlier, as far as it not being so much about the actual demolition of, you know, the foliage or trees or whatever, but the sense of the area, the open space area. Can you elaborate on that? It was just something you said earlier when you were answering one of the questions.
For sure. Yep. So both buildings share that sense of the relationship between being with each other and their location as part of this larger parent title, which there are very few examples, I suppose, of that relationship between a gatehouse and what would once have been the house. It's not so much the historical or the architectural things that are significant. The larger house obviously post-dates the original Spode house, but the grounds of the 19th century estate is what endures between the two structures.
Right. So it's more about, it's not so much about the physical demolition as much of a demolition of the area itself.
That's correct.
Okay. And just another one. There does obviously between yourself and the well, sorry, not yourself, but the report and the deputation that we've heard from the applicant, a bit of a difference of opinion about the significance of the yard itself. When you said earlier about the interpretation of what the feel of the yard was, do we have any sort of evidence or proof that leads to that, or is it more of an interpretation of what we think putting A and B and C together?
If I can just draw your attention to some of the photos that are attached to the back of the report, it gives you a sense of the historical landscape. The very first photograph is a view down Stoke Street, and the existing gatehouse is to the right.
Page number, please. I've got to scroll several hundred pages, so I can go straight to a page number. Thanks, Sarah.
Mr. Noy, can you help me here?
Yes, I think page 34 is that's the one that shows Stoke House in its wider setting. Would that be correct, Sarah?
Yes, that would be correct.
Yep. So it's page 34.
Thank you very much for that. If there are further questions. Was it Alderman Briscoe?
Now I've just connected via the public Wi-Fi. I hope it's better now.
You are clear, yes.
Yes, the internal Wi-Fi, because I'm in the building, doesn't seem to be very good today. However, Ms. Wade, can you see this backyard from any public street or from the Stoke house itself?
So you can see the if you're in Stoke Street, you can see through some of the vegetation through to the side, through to Stoke Lodge, the current lodge, and you can see Stoke Lodge if you are standing in Stoke Street. You can see it along the driveway.
Yes, I understand you can see Stoke Lodge because it's quite a big house.
Mm.
I'm saying the application with this small garden at the back of the applicant's part of the application, can you see, does it read anywhere that is part of the Stoke Lodge grounds? Because my understanding is because of the hedges and the low nature of the application's building, then you wouldn't be able to see this alleged social significance of a bit of grass.
Social significance.
So there is some clearing of the vegetation so that the new house will be visible to some extent from Stoke Street.
Okay, thank you. I might ask Mr. Noy shortly another question. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Briscoe. Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, one more question for Ms. Wait, sorry. The nature of the development is not in question here. Like it doesn't come into the argument. The structure, the design, the architecture of it. That's not in question at all here. It's the fact that it's the demolition of this particular site.
That's correct. In essence, what it is it's the removal of this remnant part of this landscape, I suppose, that will be lost by the positioning of a new dwelling, a new structure on it.
Okay, then. Thank you.
That's right.
Okay, and I suppose further along from that, if the nature of the development itself isn't the issue here, does that mean anything, even something smaller, or as the applicant said, if there was a shed to be built on that same spot, would be equally likely for it to be recommended for refusal?
It's impossible to say without seeing any sort of proposal.
Thank you. Were there any other questions for Ms. White? Alderman Briscoe.
No, I've got a question for Mr. Noy.
Go for it.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Noy, would you agree that the grounds of Stoke House, which I'm looking at page 34, seems to have a good curtilage around it, and presumably in days gone by, that whole block was the grounds of Stoke Lodge or Stoke House. This small little greenery, which no one will be able to see now, no one sees at the moment, how can that be significant with the current setting out of Stoke House? Because the backyards of all the surrounding properties presumably was once part of the Stoke estate. So I'm finding it hard to find the reasons why a small little backyard of a site you can't see and won't be able to see much has so much significance.
Yeah, look, I think the difference here is that the gatehouse is an original building within that estate setting, whereas the significant other dwellings are all much more recent additions. So this 14 Stoke Street has a, I suppose, historic physical connection to 12, and by placing a building, a dwelling in to that setting, you are basically disconnecting that physical landscape connection between the two, and I, you know, I think we've or Sarah Wade has already indicated that it's not so much the social significance, although the report does talk about that social significance, but it is that physical disconnection that would occur as a result of this new fairly significant building being placed between the two original buildings.
Any further questions or comments? Alderman Briscoe, do you still have your hand up for a reason?
Yeah, Chairman.
Oh, Councillor Harvey.
There you go, hands up. Can I just ask, what's the use of the substantial building on the site? Is it a private residence? And they haven't offered any complaints with regard to the proposal?
Look, I understand it's a guest house, but clearly I understand that it's no representation's been made.
Well, look, Chairman, we've got a motion from Alderman Briscoe for approval, but I do comprehend what's been said here by the council heritage officer, and I also understand what Mr. Corney is also talking about. So we've got a battle of opinion here. I do get the premise that, as the director's just said, that this new proposal disconnects or sits between two elements of the overall property. So I do, I do see that connection being disconnected, but I'm really struggling though to support the officer's recommendation. So yeah, I'm not, but look, I'll have to, I'm still making up my mind here. It's a really challenging decision because I don't think it'll be a visible development. And it might be something, if the motion gets up, Director, what's the outcome for that? How does it proceed?
It will go to council for determination because it's a recommendation from this committee contrary to the officer recommendation. So full council will make a determination, and if they support the recommendation of the committee, then that will be it. There won't be any scope for appeal by any representors because there are none.
Yeah. All right. Look, I'm going to foreshadow the officer's recommendation just to test it and to satisfy myself, because I've got to pick a side here, and I will stick with the officer's recommendation. It's a really challenging decision, but I'll go with the officer's recommendation for refusal, but I dare say it's going to get up tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Any other comments or questions? Oh, look, I'll just briefly give mine then. I think, and as Councillor Harvey said, there are obviously some conflicting sort of viewpoints, and all of them seem quite valid as far as the interpretation of how this property just fits in the property and how it relates to the house. I do also think that, you know, given the situation, we've got zero representations. We do have a bit of a conflict of opinions as far as how this should be interpreted. I'm leaning towards supporting Alderman Briscoe's motion. I think I'm leaning more towards the interpretation given by Mr. Corney. And at the same time, I think given the fact that there are no representations against it, I think that's telling as to the community's interpretation of the significance of the property. And I also think that it would be the least risky road for us to go down if we are unsure, because if we do go down that road and do opt to approve this application, there's no one that's going to be appealing it, because obviously it appears that no one in the community has indicated a interest in protecting the heritage of this application. So I'll be supporting the motion moved by Alderman Briscoe. Now, if there are no further comments by anybody, I'll move the motion put by Alderman Briscoe, which is a motion for approval with conditions. Alderman Briscoe, how do you vote?
I support the motion. Thank you.
Support. Councillor Harvey?
Against.
Okay. Councillor Dutta?
I'm against it because conditions are not stated as yet. Thank you.
Right. Councillor Coates?
In favour.
And I'm in favour. So that would be a approval, Director. Thank you. So that will be, as I understand, will be going to council next week. So thank you for that, Mr. Courtney. That's it's been recommended. The next item is, and that's it for deputations as well. The next item is item 7.1.2, which is 11 Swan Street, partial demolition, alterations and extension and landscaping. Anybody have any questions, or would anybody like to kick off? Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. I've had a really good look through the plans and the reports associated with this rebirth of the Peacock Centre, and I'm really impressed, I think, with what we're going to get here. The restoration of the building is, I think, very clearly going to improve the heritage nature of the building. It was a sad tragedy that it was burnt down, but I think we're going to end up with a good restoration of the building. The additional wing, the demolition of the old 60s wing and the new proposed wing looks pretty good. It looks like it'll be a much more significant outcome than we had previously. But I've also had a couple of concerns around a few things which I'd like the director to try and address for me, please. One was with regard to the windows on the new wing and the sunlight that they will receive and the orientation. Will there be a vista, and will they get adequate sunlight throughout the year? And we know what the use of the building is, and sunlight's a very important element of caring for those who would be using this facility. Are you satisfied there's enough sunlight that penetrates those windows on the new wing?
Yeah, look, because of the orientation on that side of the building, it's very, very difficult to get direct sunlight into those windows. But my understanding is that the majority of those are bedrooms, and there are other communal rooms throughout the rest of the building that does have access to ample natural sunlight. So there is the ability to move around the building to access that direct sunlight, which I appreciate is desirable in any complex.
All right. Okay. So, you've answered that for me. And look, I can't judge the effectiveness of it until it's built. I'm not it's hard to see the plans at the scale we look at to see the adequacy of it. But judging by what I can interpret from the plans, the building looks a great deal more pleasant than what was there before. So that's a tick for me. Can I just inquire about bike parking and bike charging on the site? That was mentioned in one of the representations as well. Are we satisfied that there's sufficient bike parking? And are there facilities for bike riders to be able to charge their bikes close to the premises, and also to have, I'm assuming there's lots of showers in this place as well. So I assume there would be staff facilities for showering. Again, you've got to look at the plans in a particular style, and it's hard to interpret the plans at such a scale when you have got the big, maps in front of you. There's substantial bike parking. Yeah,
look, I'd refer you to condition engineering 5, which requires the provision of a minimum of 2 bicycle parking spaces for employees to Class 2 and a minimum of 6 bicycle parking spaces for visitors to Class 3. So I would have to provide further clarification as to what that class means, but
All right, so it meets the requirements under the scheme, and I don't know what those classes mean either, but I'm just questioning whether or not it's adequate for a site that will have, how many people do you think will be using this site at any one time during the day or staying overnight?
yeah, look, I'm not sure, but I've just been advised that a Class 2 is a lock-up facility, so you know that's consistent with the standard. So I don't think we can go beyond that.
Okay, so that's 6 bikes that would be locked up and secure.
No, two bicycle parking spaces for employees that can be locked up, and 6 bicycle parking spaces for visitors. So that would imply that if they've got their own lock, then they can lock onto a parking facility for bicycles.
Or any other available object if required.
That's right.
All right, but look, I'm happy to move it. I think I might have already, but it's a great outcome, and I've been waiting for this building to be reborn for a number of years. When you drive past it, it's really quite depressing, and I look forward to it coming out of the ground again, and you know, getting back to some sort of former glory.
Excellent. We've got a motion for approval by Councillor Harvey. Are there any comments or questions from any of the other members? Councillor Dutta.
Yeah, on similar lines, I would endorse the points made, and without taking much time, I would support this as well. Thank you.
Excellent. Anybody else? No. Councillor Dutta, can you please put your hand down? All right, I'll put that to a vote then. The motion for approval moved by Councillor Harvey. Alderman Briscoe, how do you vote?
I support.
Councillor Harvey.
Support.
Councillor Dutta.
For.
Councillor Coates.
For.
And myself, I support. So that is unanimously passed. Does that go to council or is that done?
It goes to council.
It goes to council. Excellent. Now, before I move on to the next item, I do have to apologise. I noticed that Councillor Ewan is on the feed, and I suppose I better ask if she'd wish to be co-opted into the meeting. Oh, here we go. In that case, can we have a motion to co-opt Councillor Ewan into the?
Yes, so move.
Okay, it was either Councillor Harvey or Councillor Briscoe. We'll take it from Councillor Harvey, I guess. Is there any dissent to that, or are we happy to just approve that?
But also, Chairman, Councillor Ewan will need to have her video camera on if she's to be registered as attending.
Oh, I can come on and off, but I'm still running around and doing stuff. But if you're happy to be a bit seasick with that, then that's fine.
Look, that's fine by me, Councillor Ewan.
Okay.
Excellent. So we'll move on to the next item, which is item 7.1.3, which is 55 of Runnymede Street, Battery Point, for partial demolition and alterations. Do we have anyone who wants to kick it off with questions or comments? Councillor Harvey.
Look, I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation. This is a retrospective application. It's been refused by the Heritage Council and the council officers. So I'm satisfied that the shutters need to be removed because they fail the heritage test. I'm happy with the
recommended for refusal. Correcting. Harvey, I think the motion is a recommendation for approval.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's correct. I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation, which includes removal of the shutters.
Okay. Look, we've got a motion from Councillor Harvey. Then, does anybody want to add or ask any questions? Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you, Alderman Barakis, acting chair or chair. Yes, look, aesthetically, I think because I have a house with shutters, my shutters were authentic, I think. It makes the house look better, but I agree with the heritage. There's no evidence to show that it ever had shutters. I think the shutters were on more substantial buildings, and this is definitely a workman's cottage. In other times, I'm sure we wouldn't have had great objections to the shutters, but as there's no historic evidence given to us, I agree with the officer's assessment that we should not allow the shutters as part of the application. I suppose it's important that you have good access to these buildings, and especially apparently the occupant of the building is 71 years old, so having handrails and a better steps is far better. So I think that's the key thing of the application. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Alderman Briscoe. Is there any, can you and Councillor Harvey put your hands down? Councillor Harvey's already done it. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Coates.
Look, through your chair to the director, I just want to get my head around the shutters. Obviously, the proposal was for not just shutters; it was for the handrail and the steps, etc. If the applicant purely had wanted to put something on their windows to help prevent the sun coming in, so they were more efficient with their power bills, would they have had to have sought approval from council to do such a thing? Or is it because it's part of a bigger application to do more changes to the aesthetics of the house?
Yeah, no, they would. If they are altering the external condition of the facade, then they would have to seek consent from the Planning Authority and the Tasmanian Heritage Council.
Okay, cool. Thank you. No, to me, it almost read like the red awnings debate again. I'm looking at those, and I agree with Alderman Briscoe's comments, which is that, that if anything, make the place look better, but that's an aesthetic argument, I guess. The question is one of planning. So, thank you.
Okay. Any other question or comment? No. In that case, I think the motion was moved by Councillor Harvey, was it? Yes. So we've got the motion for approval by Councillor Harvey. Alderman Briscoe, how do you vote?
Support it.
Support. Councillor Harvey.
For.
Councillor Dutta.
For.
Councillor Coates.
For.
And I'm in favour of. So that is passed unanimously, and that's all of the planning items. Next.
Medium Councillor Ewan, Chair.
I also support.
Oh, apologies. Sorry. Councillor Ewan.
Fine. Yes, 4. Thank you.
So that is in fact passed unanimously. Apologies for that. So we move on to reports. 8.1, we've got the delegated decisions report.
I move the recommendation.
Any other questions or comments? You've still got your hand up, Alderman Briscoe. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
I just put up my hand, actually. No, I didn't. No.
Okay. Look, in that case, I'll move that. Alderman Briscoe, how do you vote?
Support.
Councillor Harvey.
For.
Councillor Dutta.
For.
Councillor Coates.
For.
Councillor Ewan.
4.
And I vote for. So that's passed. The next item is City Planning Advertising Report, item 8.2. Anybody? Councillor Dutta's introduced, move the motion. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to ask or add?
The standard question, Chairman, is there anything we should be brought attention to in the report?
I'd refer that to Ms. Abbey.
There is one item for 409 Argyle Street, which is listed for the council decision. That one's attracted 8 representations. It's a surprising amount of representations, to be honest, given what's proposed. It's a fence to go up between 2 neighbouring properties. So that one will be before you. There's also, towards the end of the list, 22 Fitzroy Place, which is a proposal to demolish an existing house and rebuild a different property on that site. That's also attracted a high number of representations, and there will be a particular consideration to heritage grounds for that one.
All right.
So, through you, Chair, does that mean that the Fitzroy place will come to the committee?
Yes, it will. Yes.
Thank you.
That one will be determined by the council because it's so far there are 10 representations.
Thank you.
Any other questions? In that case, I'll move the item. Alderman Briscoe, how do you vote?
Support.
Councillor Harvey.
For.
Councillor Dutta.
For.
Councillor Coates.
For.
Councillor Ewan.
For.
And I'm for. So that is passed. Next, we're on to questions without notice. Are there any questions? Councillor Dutta.
Yeah, I have two questions. Question number one, through you, Chair, can the director provide an update of the status of the development application for the cable car project, and also whether the council's requests for further information are beyond the scope of the planning scheme requirements, as has been suggested on the company's Facebook page? That's question one. I can forward this question later.
I'll take that one on notice, Chair.
Thank you. Question number two. What budget has been allocated for independent consultants to assist the City Council to assess the cable car development application in the 2019 and 2020 budget, and also in the 20 and 21 budget? Is this partly or fully covered by the development application fees to be paid by the applicant? And if not, how much will be paid by the council?
Again, Chair, I'll take that one on notice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll forward the questions across.
Good.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I do have a couple. Director, for the it's a question that seems to get asked reasonably often in regards to bicycle spaces in during development applications. Do we have any statistics as to the take up of those or the usage of those, and how in demand the bicycle places on private buildings are? Do we have any numbers or stats on that?
Look, I think this will require further investigation, so I'll take that one on notice.
Thank you. And another one, which might be a complicated one, for multiple dwellings applications, say ones that are 4 and above, not just the double dwellings, but more the larger structures. Do we have any stats for the the applications that have been approved versus the ones that have actually been completed and built? Do we have any understanding on how many get approved and not built, or how many get approved and then actually do get built? And do we have any statistics on them in the last couple of years?
Again, I think we would be able to get statistics, but I'll take that one on notice.
Thank you.
See if we can provide them to you.
Excellent, thank you. Are there any other questions? Oh, Councillor Duddy, you've still got your hand up. Is that another question? No. Councillor Coates.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. So a question to the director. Can you confirm that it's completely out of the control of any applicant when they're putting in their DAs as to how the City of Hobart Resources assessing it? And so whether the City of Hobart decided to use their own employees or whether they decided to outsource any of the work is completely out of the control of any individual applicant?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Doesn't appear so. So we'll move on to the closed portion of the meeting. Oh, does that need a motion to adopt those questions?
I move, Chairman, that we close this meeting.
Okay. We've got a motion from Alderman Briscoe.